The problem isn't that the Glazers are bad owners who are leeching money out of Man United. The problem is that they're bad owners who are leeching money out of Man United without them winning trophies anymore. Hi, my name is Mike. Welcome to my vlog about football in general and Burnley FC in particular. A vlog that this week is watching elite athletes competing in events that they have worked towards for a decade or more, while I tell them where they went wrong while sitting on a sofa eating crisps. So we have the new shirts coming out, which look absolutely fantastic. The usual guff and waffle about being inspired by history and the club and all that kind of stuff. Basically, when it came to the away shirt, the black away shirt, they might as well put out a tweet that said, "This looks bloody gorgeous, lads, please buy." And the chances of me buying one, because they offer an unsponsored version, has increased, because I've said before that I will not buy any club merchandise with a gambling sponsor on it. Although I do have to admit I will probably wait towards the end of the season where it gets cheaper, because there's the chances of me buying some hugely overpriced piece of merchandise just because I like the brand or the logo on the front and paying a huge amount of money for it is somewhere between slim and none. Yeah. But speaking of pricing, I kind of had this one going for a few months now, actually, funnily enough, since about March, and it was kind of kicked off again. I saw some debate online around the ticket pricing, and it's to do with accounts, Burnley accounts and all that kind of thing. Now, there's a couple of things I want to say right from the start. I'm not an accountant, but I do know my way around a spreadsheet. And this is not a judgment on anything like that. I don't have any inside information. I'm making no judgments on accounting practices and all that kind of thing. I'm merely making comment about accounts. One of the things that came up when the accounts were published back in April was that the Clarets had made a loss of £27.9 million for the year 2022-23. That covers the championship season where we were promoted by winning the league down the road. Now, the Clarets did lose £27.9 million, and people began to kind of lose their mind about this. Some people, going, "Oh my God, the club's going bust," etc., and so forth. When it comes to accountancy, there is a old saying that an accountant friend of mine taught me years and years ago. If you know when you have a good accountant, when you ask them, "What's 2 plus 2?" and the accountant replies, "What do you want it to be?" Burnley FC made a loss, £27.9 million, and to be honest, it was completely expected by people like myself, and I'll explain why. But one of the things that kind of ties into that, and I want you to keep the £27.9 million number in your head, is that the Clarets revealed the ticket pricing, the one-off ticket pricing for games this year. They split games into category A, B and C. There are obviously categories around the ground depending on where you want to sit. The most expensive for the walk-up price for a game this year will be £55. That is for a category A game, and that is in the Longside Upper Central, not too far away from where I sit. And people have gone, "This is a ridiculous amount of money." Now, I wanted you to bear that £27.9 million number in mind when I show you this number. If the Clarets were to sell every ticket in Turf Moor, every seat, home and away, for every game, at the highest possible price, that is £55 per ticket, the official capacity of Turf Moor is 21,944. And they did that for 23 home championship games. Do you know how much revenue that would get the club? £27,759,160, or slightly less than Burnley FC made a loss in the championship winning season. That is the club being as successful as it could, and it still made a loss larger than the maximum possible ticket price it could charge everybody. And it's not going to charge everybody that, because obviously season tickets have a discount, where you sit in the ground has a discount, and of course we're not going to sell out every game, because that requires away fans to sell out all their tickets at £55 per game every single time. But people still lose their mind because they seem to think that their actions as a fan have a large bearing on the finances of Burnley Football Club, and it isn't true. ALK purchased Burnley Football Club for somewhere between, it's been reported, 120 million or 200 million back in 2020. The reason for it not actually being open is it was a leverage buyout, and I'm going to kind of talk about that before. But basically ALK's business plan, and they've been pretty open about this, is to purchase Burnley Football Club for an amount, to do it up effectively, to increase the commercial revenue, to increase the fan revenue, to make sure the stadium is making money, to turn Burnley Football Club into an established Premier League team, and then sell it for a profit. They are not there to basically, be good custodians to make a loss every year. Now, they will make a loss every year. I'm going to tell you this. They're going to make a loss every year because it's beneficial to make a loss every year. But they will, in the end, the purchase price plus the cumulative total of the losses plus an amount of profit, they will sell it for that much. And people say this is wrong and you shouldn't be doing that kind of thing. Now, I give you an example. If I borrow 100 grand to buy a house and I spend 50 grand doing it up and then I sell it for 250 grand, I've made 100 grand profit. And am I wrong to have done so? If I buy a business for 100 million and I spend 20 to 30 million on infrastructure and personnel and I lose that every year for 5 years and then I sell it for 300 million, am I wrong? ALK have bought this using a leveraged buyout, which basically meant that Burnley had money in the bank. They borrowed, ALK borrowed some money to buy the club, and then they took that money that Burnley FC had and they paid the loan back and they put the debt onto the club. Now, this is not a particularly nice way of doing it, but it is a way of doing business. It is an established way of doing business. And again, I'll give you an example. If you were buying a house for 100 grand and you knew in there was a cupboard that had 60 grand in it, then, of course you're going to use that 60 grand to pay your 100 grand back, or part of your 100 grand back. That's kind of the way leverage buyouts work. The reason leverage buyouts have a bad name is the Glazers of Manchester United. Glazers are probably the most hated owners in certainly the Premier League, probably in English football. But I'm going to put it another way. The Glazers are bad owners. Yeah, they've taken a fortune out of Manchester United over the 15 or so years that they've owned them. But they also have spent £1 billion on players. Probably, I think it's top 3 in Europe over that time. They have one of the largest wage bills. They have won, in the time that the Glazers have owned it, 5 Premier League titles, 1 FA Cup, 4 League Cups, 1 Champions League and 1 Europa League. Yep, the Glazers are bad owners. The problem isn't that the Glazers are bad owners who are leeching money out of Man United. The problem is that they're bad owners who are leeching money out of Man United without them winning trophies anymore. Now, of course, the Glazers have taken around about £1 billion out for themselves, and you could argue they could have kept that in the club. So they could have spent £2 billion on players. And what does that do for the competitiveness of the Premier League? Either they win everything, or Man City, backed by unlimited state money, join the arms race, and basically that turns the Premier League into a permanent 2-horse race, kind of like the Scottish Premier League. And people say the Glazers are bad businessmen. Well, they paid around about 600 million for Manchester United, and they just sold 27.7% of it to Sir Jim Ratcliffe for 1.25 billion. So they have doubled their money while still keeping 75% of the club. And you're telling me these people don't know what they're doing. But then everyone's going, oh, Jim Ratcliffe, isn't he good? He's the saviour of Manchester United. He's taking it away from the Glazers. Well, as I said, he's only bought 27% of the club. And Jim Ratcliffe, well, he's Britain's richest man. He's worth £21 billion. And part of the reason he's worth £21 billion was in 2020 he moved to Monaco. He rearranged his tax affairs to make them more efficient by leaving the country. And that avoided, quite legally, quite okay, £4 billion in tax. That £4 billion could have been spent on schools hospitals, roads. The two-child benefit cap that is in the news at the moment costs around 1.3 billion a year, and he avoided completely legitimately by simply changing his nationality, avoided £4 billion of tax, and then he bought Manchester United for 1.25 billion. So basically he bought it with my and your money. And then, to top it all off, he tried the water by suggesting we build a stadium for him as well. So ALK bought Burnley with the same leverage buyout method, but that doesn't mean they are going to do it Glazers. They can't. Because Manchester United, as I say, is a huge revenue generator, worldwide brand that generates a fortune in sponsorship and income. And Burnley are not. So their plan, as I say, is to invest. Bring the infrastructure up. They will probably make a loss. They will probably make a loss every year because that is how it works. If you think about it, this is not a moral judgment or a moral point, but money that the company pays in tax to the government to pay for your schools, your hospitals, and the town to turf scheme, money that that club pays in tax is money that is going out of the club and never being used for other things. So that is the plan. Build up the club, invest, make a loss. They will make a loss every year until they sell. The point is to be able to cover the losses. As long as they cover the losses, everything is hunky-dory, and then they will sell. They will sell for their initial purchase price, plus the losses, plus a profit for themselves, and they will head off. That is business. And as I say, those losses are likely to be more than the Clarets generate in ticket revenue every season. Because the fans don't matter in modern football when it comes to accounting. The fans' revenue is dwarfed by sponsorship and by TV revenue. The riches you get in the Premier League are so vast that for one season in the Premier League you get 4 times selling every single ticket at Turf Moor for every game for more money than you can possibly hope to see. And this is modern football. This is the way it is. Accountancy is a trick. Accountancy is, and I say this as someone who studies things like magic, accountancy is a shell game. It's 3-card Monty. It's find the lady. Where is the money? They keep moving it around. What is the loss every year? The loss is what the owners determine it is best to be. They will shift money around to avoid things like tax. They will make sure the bills are paid, or at least good owners will make sure the bills are paid, the wages are paid. But they will take that money and they will move it around as best benefits the accountancy. The game is within the game now. Accountancy matters more sometimes than what actually happens on the pitch. And I'm going to give you some examples because let's assume it goes well. And I'm actually going to give you and I'm actually going to ask you a question. If you had 100 million to invest and you had a 3 in 4 chance of Burnley FC becoming an established Premier League club for the next decade, would you do it? Would you make Burnley lose 30 million quid for the next couple of years in order to become an established Premier League club for a decade? Not going to say yeah, not going to say no. I said earlier that revenues and the money going into a football club has very little to do with the fans, and all you have to do is look at how the Premier League clubs are going financially to understand that fandom doesn't really matter anymore. The Premier League is, I think, second in terms of TV revenue of all sports worldwide. Second, I think, only to the NFL. There are 4 major leagues, by the way, in the US. There's NHL ice hockey, NFL American football, Major League Baseball, and NBA basketball. The Premier League is second. They get an incredible amount of revenue from TV. But if you actually ask quietly around every Premier League club, 3/4 of them are up for sale right now. If you want to try and buy an NFL franchise, you can't. If you want to buy an NHL franchise, and that's the ice hockey, that is the smallest league, smallest of the major 4 leagues in the States, you can't. If you want to buy a baseball or an NBA franchise, there might be 1 or 2 available for sale if you ask the right questions. But if you come to the Premier League, 3/4 of the Premier League is up for sale right now. The only ones who really aren't: Man City, Newcastle, Man United, because they've just actually been sold partly, Arsenal, and probably Brighton. Liverpool were quietly put up for sale. No takers. Brentford are currently up for sale. Wolves have been up for sale. Wolves' finances, they've been a Premier League club for a few years, but they are up for sale right now because what happened was their Chinese owners had the taps turned off, and that suspiciously cheap pipeline of Portuguese players that were getting through an agent, that also dried up a bit. Brighton aren't for sale, but Brighton, who are used as a model for other clubs including Burnley, currently owe their owner £300 million. Chelsea, they were bought a year ago, they've spent a fortune, but they won everything for 20 years. 20 years they were top under Abramovich, winning Champions League, Premier League trophies, and they lost £80 million a year, every year on average for 20 years, doing it, winning everything. And they currently have a sponsor, by the way, whose sponsorship agreement with Chelsea is more than that sponsor's official turnover. And you're telling me accounting is not a shell game, is not 3-Car Monty, is not Find the Lady. If you want some examples, I'm kind of going through clubs and their various bits of dodginess one by one. Man City, obviously 115 charges, still outstanding because they have more lawyers. They have done everything they possibly can to prevent those charges being listened to and a decision being made. And they have more lawyers, more expensive lawyers, and they just basically have already admitted they will throw as much money as they can at lawyers and delaying tactics in order to have those 115 charges either never heard or simply dismissed. But they've done it again with a Savinio purchase. They've basically bought a player called Savinio from French club Troyes for €40 million. Savinio was Troyes' record signing 2 years ago, and he is obviously their record sale. And you know how many games he played for Troyes? 0. Troyes are owned by the City Football Group. They bought Savinio, Troyes bought Savinio 2 years ago. They immediately loaned him out to PSV in the Netherlands. His season at PSV finished. They immediately loaned him out to another City Football Group club called Girona in La Liga. Now, UEFA does not allow interclub transfers. But the rule is that those clubs, it's not if you're a member of City Football Group, as Man City, Girona and Troyes are, it's actually between clubs, and those clubs should not be capable of meeting in European competition. So there is an agreement. You cannot go from Girona to Manchester City. There cannot be a transfer there because it is a related party transaction, all that kind of thing. But you can go from Troyes to Manchester City because those two clubs are hugely unlikely to meet in European competition. So basically you have Manchester City using the multi-club model to bring players around, get them experience and work permits and all that kind of thing, and then get them into Manchester City. So as I say, Troyes, record signing, never played a game for them, never turned out in their shirt, spent less than a month at the club over 2 years, and has now left. It is their record sale. And if you think that's being part of a multi-club group is good, well, Girona are in the Champions League, Man City are in the Champions League, and Troyes, 2 relegations in those 2 seasons. Sounded like they could have done with a guy like Savinio, really. So Everton are in trouble. Points deductions last year, owners, new owners falling through, so on and so forth. And that's the problem with the Premier League's making, because their owner who is desperately trying to sell up right now. The Premier League never really checked where that money was coming from. It was never really clear that it was his money. And it wasn't really a coincidence that when Russia invaded Ukraine and the same sanctions that were put on Roman Abramovich forced him to sell Chelsea, that was when the pipes were turned off at Everton. But the problem is that Everton were building a stadium at the time, and that is costing an absolute fortune. So now you have this complex series of loans between companies that actually, the reason Everton can't be sold at the moment and their current the latest bidder pulled out was basically Everton owe £200 million, but it's not clear who to. And they were called the Friedkin Group. They didn't want to spend £200 million paying off a loan, not knowing whether they'd actually spent that 200 million with the right people, and you can't really blame them. But they still want that stadium, and that stadium is where the money in Everton really is, because you've got the corporate hospitality and all that kind of stuff going on there. That is a huge revenue stream before a single fan takes their seat to watch Everton play. And speaking of stadiums, here's an example where there was actually a club benefited from a sweet stadium deal, and that is West Ham, who play at the London Stadium. And do you know how much West Ham pay the London Stadium for rent every year? £2.5 million. That is a stadium that cost 770 million of taxpayers' money, that was practically given away by a certain Boris Johnson for £2.5 million a year. And to give you an idea, £2.5 million is way probably less than it actually cost Burnley to run Turf Moor, let alone a stadium the size of the London Stadium. But going back to ticket prices, if with a capacity of around about 55,000, if West Ham sold every ticket for a match, one match, at £46 per ticket, that covers their rent for a year. And you and me are paying the upkeep of that stadium. In other countries, Boris Johnson would be in jail for corruption. So what is the point of this one? Well, the point is to kind of get some of this off my chest, but also whenever Burnley's accounts or pricing or whatever is mentioned on message boards and social media, there is always this flap, there is always this, oh my god, the sky's falling, and so on and so forth. And it's wasting time. You are looking at the wrong thing. I told you it's a shell game. It's the cup and balls. It's 3-card Monty. It's find the lady. It's where is the money. Only the people behind the scenes know. And I'm saying that, I'm not saying it's a con, because a magician can do find the lady and the cup and balls and all that kind of stuff, and it's hugely entertaining seeing how it's done. But the point of find the lady and the cup and balls is you're being shown something that is not actually the case, and you're drawing a conclusion from something that is not true. And that is the same when it comes to accountancy. Burnley FC made a loss of £27.9 million during a championship promotion season. That doesn't tell you anything. That doesn't tell you about how the club is going. That doesn't tell you who is getting paid what. It certainly does not tell you what the plan is 3, 4, 5 years down the line. Now, you can kind of say, you know, that's modern football and it shouldn't be that way. And you're absolutely right. And the Premier League is apparently going to have some kind of independent regulation. But are you really holding out hope on that one? Because the same people who are going to be setting up this independent regulator are the incoming government. The same people who currently set up the water regulator and came into power. And their answer, when someone said to them, "You are the government, will you force the water regulator to stop privatised water companies pumping shit into our rivers?" Their answer was no. And we're looking at these people to bring regulation to football. So that's where we are. That's where we are with modern football. I know this was a depressing one, but I kind of wanted to say, look, don't dive into these things too much. You will just end up winding yourself up and drawing the wrong conclusions about where the money's coming in, where the money's going out. You cannot tell. It is a game within a game, and it's actually depressingly becoming more important, as I say, to play the accounting game than it is to play the football match. And that's a depressing state of affairs. And I'm sorry for bringing a downer up, but I thought I'd get it off my chest, 2 weeks before the season starts, and I can actually, okay, now I've got that off my chest, we can actually look forward to it. Look forward to a season. But I asked the question earlier about, would you do what ALK do? Which is to buy the club for 100 million, put it in debt, make losses of 30 million for 5 years, sell for 300, make yourself a profit. Would you do it? Okay. I don't, yes or no. Leave a comment down below. Would you do it? If that was guaranteed. Not guaranteed, 3 in 4 chance that you could walk away after 6 years with 100 million quid profit. And Burnley in the Premier League. Would you? Let me know. And here's the second question. Burnley are going to make £5 million profit next year. And they have to pay tax on that. They're in the Championship, but they're paying tax on a £5 million profit. Or you have the opportunity to buy a striker for £15 million. And that striker has a 3 in 4 chance of getting you out of the Championship and into the Premier League. Would you do it? These are the questions. It's easy to say the club should be run this way. It's easy to say this is how football should be. But when you put it like that, are you a football fan? Are you an accountant? What's your risk? I'm interested. Let me know below. Let me know your comments. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you would do in that situation. If you were a billionaire, would you put money into Burnley Football Club? I'm interested. Because I once did the numbers, by the way. And I worked out how much I need to have before I would actually consider buying Burnley FC. And I worked out it was probably about £1.5 billion. Or about 30% of what Jim Ratcliffe saved, that patriot, Jim Ratcliffe saved by moving his nationality to Monaco. So, excited for the forthcoming season? Till next time. Up the Clarets.